In the previous lesson, we managed to implement this little red rectangle to highlight when a particular input field is required, and it's certainly quite a nice little touch. But there is a slight issue that when we go into the form for the first time, like now for example, the actual red boxes appear straight away. Some people like that, some people don't. Some people would prefer it to stay black, and then when we actually get it wrong, for example, if we type in it and then we delete the actual field, then we want the whole field to go red. So I'm going to show you how you can do that if you prefer that particular look. How we're going to do that is we're going to utilize the onBlur event. So in the moment that this text box got focus, when I tab away to the one over here, this input box is then going to fire the onBlur event. So when we've done that, that is when we can actually make this thing go red. Alright, so how are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to first of all go to our input boxes. Where are they? They are, here they are. And we're going to have an onBlur event. So onBlur, and we need to define a function. Right, so up we go. And just after here, let's put a function called onHandleBlur. We're going to take the event, and what are we going to do? We want to have some little flag inside our React state for each of the fields, and when the onBlur event is fired, we can then set that flag to true to indicate that the onBlur event has fired, and that's when we can actually then set the actual field to red if we want to. Okay, so let's go up to our state up here, and what are we going to do? Well, I think the best way of doing this is to create ourselves an object, and let's call it touched. So it's going to be touched when you actually go inside the actual input field, and then you press tab or you click away from it, and then we're going to set the touch field for each of the properties to true. So we're just going to have exactly the same fields as we have here. So we have name, and we're going to default it to false, email, and default it to false. And you guessed it, we're going to have shipping address, and what is it going to be? It's going to be false. Nothing but predictable. Okay, so down in our handle blur, this is going to be nice and easy, and it's going to be pretty much the same as we do for setting the state here. And in fact, I'm just going to steal the code here and paste into there. We're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're only interested in setting the touched object now. So we're going to leave a ... preview state, and then we're going to do touched. And this is where we can do pretty much the same sort of thing. So object, let's get rid of this just a moment. And inside the object, we're going to take the existing touched object from the state. So ... form.touched. And now we're simply going to update the corresponding property inside the touched object. Okay, so if we do something like name, and then value. And what's the value going to be? Well, it's going to be true. So that means we are going to set the corresponding property, whether it's name, email, or shipping address, and we're going to change the flag to true. And then the ... form touched is basically going to leave all the other properties in our touched object completely as is. They're not going to be affected in any way. And the same for the one up here as well. Because we are setting the entire object, we have to make sure we don't interfere with any of the values in the existing state. And that's very, very important when you're updating state. Do not forget to do this. Don't do something like this, for example, la 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 la, and take all this away. Otherwise you're going to cry because your state's going to get wiped out. All the other values are going to be set to undefined, and it causes a whole load of debugging nightmare. Trust me on that. Okay, so that's our handle blur, and let's make sure we put handle blur there. We'll just do handle blur like this, and we can just simply copy it on each of the ones we are interested in, which is here. And now what we want to do is have some way of looking at this property, which is touched, and deciding whether we're going to display the red rectangle or not. So I think we're going to have another function, and we're going to call it show error, and we're going to take a field as the parameter. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to first of all have a look and see whether we actually do have an error. So let's do const as error, and look at the errors object for the corresponding field. So that's going to return us a truthy value, whether it's got an error or not. And then this is where we look at the touched property. We're going to do const show, or maybe should show. Look at the state, look at the state of form touched, and look at the corresponding fields. So again, that would be a truthy or falsy. The form touched is actually set. Now we can just do return. If we have an error, then we should use the should show value, whether that's true or false. Otherwise, we're going to not display the rectangle. So it's show error. And how are we going to use this? Where we're simply going to go down to where we have invalid, and we're going to change it from where it says error's name, and we're going to call the show error, and we give it the name of the field, so name like this. Let's now copy that and go to our email, paste, change to email, and our third one down here, paste, and then just update the field to shipping address. Save. Okay, now refresh, and we can see we get our black rectangle, so the form looks normal. Then we're going to tab away from that, kapow, and now we get the actual element in red. Let's tab again out of the email, kapow, and you can see it goes red. So that's quite nice, an alternative way of doing it. Or let's do the form again. Let's go in, and let's say, for example, you go to type a name, and then you, for some strange reason, you decide to delete it, and you click on the other form like this, the other element. This now goes red. So it gives you a warning that this is something wrong with this element. So that's another way of doing it. And just to finish off, what I'm going to do is tidy up this function, because this is a longhand way of doing it. So what we can do is we don't need all of these consts anymore. So let's just simplify this right down. Let's take this guy here and paste it instead of here. That now gets rid of that line. Let's now take the errors in the field here and paste it into there. We can now get rid of that line. And we now don't need the return statement. And we don't need the brackets, so what we can do is simply delete all of that and just make it one big line like that. So it looks maybe slightly more complex, but it's a bit more compacted. Let's give it a save, and everything should work the same as it did before. There we go, blah blah blah, delete, tab, job's a good one, there we go. That's it for these few lessons on simple validation, and I shall see you in the next lesson. See you later.